the Australian Association of Bush Regenerators 2024 National Forum was hosted by our Victorian branch. Exploring the R's of ecological restoration, restoring biodiversity through resilience, regeneration, reintroduction, and reconnecting to country. The first presenter was Tein McDonald. Yes, it's all about resilience assessment, but accurate prediction requires ongoing trial and error.
Thank you. And look, I'd really like to acknowledge how touched I was with the talk of those speakers. Thank you so much for bringing the essence of land to this place. We all come from different countries in this nation, and I myself living on Ngarigo land. We hope that ARBA can assist in whatever way we can with the regeneration of culture, regeneration, reconstruction, whatever is needed. And I'm sure you all echo that feeling. Can we just have a bit of a round of applause for the speakers who are just here? Yep, so it's all about resilience. Of the 4 R's, I'm going to be focusing on resilience today, and we're talking about our vegetation communities, basically, which are the habitat of all our fauna communities and the expression of an ancient reality that remains today. And if we can conserve and restore it, that's really what we're here about. So this is a beautiful photo of a place where we sit for lunch when we do our bush regeneration. And it's like sitting under a mother. It's an animal, that tree. It's just so beautiful. So I just wanted to share that with you. How many of you here are regenerators on the ground? Could you put your hands up, please? Lovely. And those who support regenerators on the ground? Great. Those who are ecologists? Fabulous. And anybody else who hasn't put their hand up yet, please put your hand up. Okay, thank you. You're all very, very connected to restoration. Now, what I'm going to try and quickly refer to is this diagram that shows the spectrum of degradation that's inverse to the spectrum of recovery potential. Big words, but it basically means the higher the degradation, the lower the potential for spontaneous recovery once you remove the impacts. The SERA standards identify 4 approaches to doing this, and there's a reason for them to be distinguished from each other. If you look at the area above the dotted line, that just shows you that we're really just talking about regeneration or reintroduction, and that's the topic of my talk today. But below the dotted line, we look at the 4 actual approaches: spontaneous regeneration, facilitated regeneration, combined regeneration and reintroduction, and reconstruction. So they're there because we acknowledge the gradient of natural recovery potential. So this one here is spontaneous natural regeneration, and we've all seen it. Whenever you leave an ecosystem alone, you do get a response, and if it's not highly degraded, it will recover naturally. That's spontaneous natural regeneration. And it's often wrongly assumed that if this doesn't happen after the cessation of the causes, then natural regeneration won't happen at all. But this is where the facilitated regeneration comes in. Facilitated regen refers to the potential and need for more active interventions that help us trigger or cue or whatever the natural regen potential that might actually be dormant. It doesn't always happen spontaneously. This is our message. So to remove obstacles, we might treat weed and pest species. To recreate conditions, we might apply hydrological, chemical amendment, etc. To cue germination, we might have to apply soil disturbance, heat or smoke. This is really important. We need to look at the adapted resilience of that ecosystem. So why is this so? It's so because of natural adaptations. So natural selection over evolutionary timeframes has allowed the organisms to develop traits that allows them to not germinate until the conditions are right, or to germinate only when those conditions are right. And they might be seed longevity, dormancies, dispersal traits, and so on. So this is why we need to have, we're working with natural processes where when you've understood by now that the Australian Association of Bush Regenerators talks about ecological restoration in general. We support all approaches to ecological restoration, those 4 approaches that I mentioned, but we have a history of focus on assisting natural regeneration because that really gets us an excellent response. However, it is not easy to predict whether a facilitated regeneration approach may be sufficient alone and where some level of reintroduction may also be needed. And that's why we have this approach that's specifically called combined regeneration reintroduction. It's not full reintroduction, but there may be some species missing and we need to reintroduce them. And why is that so? Well, that's because resilience is largely invisible. There are buried seed banks and bud banks and outside seed sources, and that's coupled with hard-to-see seed vectors. I'll just show you some slides of a few places where I've worked, and this is happening at many, many sites. I just want to reinforce that we're not always capable of predicting, and we have to prod and poke a site and test it first quite often, unless we know the site and ecosystem very well. This is a forested wetland, and it was cleared and used for grazing for many, many, many decades. And when the site, when restoration practitioners came to the site, they saw that it had been so degraded that there was 99% weed cover. You know, what you see there is dormant Soteria. In the winter, it tends to hay off. You can see there are remnants nearby and evidence of natives above ground scattered around the site, but it looked like it may have needed planting. And I was very devoted to the idea of regeneration, assisting or facilitating regeneration, but I really didn't have a lot of confidence in this site at all. There were only 3 native ephemerals above the ground. However, we had an Indigenous group in the road, and they helped us apply fire and weed control, and after 3 years of active facilitation, this is the result. It's pretty dramatic. There's no planting being undertaken on this site. Just show you that before shot again. Okay, so extensive cover by a total of 49 species with high diversity of all the growth forms. So this taught me a lot. This taught me a lot because this is a rural site, and it was a site with a different ecosystem to what I had been used to. And I think that we always need to be learning. The take-home message from this is that we must continue to explore the boundaries of resilience potential. You know, we don't really know, and this is the message that we in other states want to make sure that people in Victoria, as Arbor develops, spread the word about. You know, we really want to make sure people test the resilience and not assume that planting is needed or direct seeding is always needed. Another site at Scotsdale Reserve, grassland, because I didn't previously have a lot of experience in grassland, but Scotsdale Reserve, a bush heritage reserve in the southern tablelands on Ngarigo land. It was covered in African lovegrass. This is a photograph taken of a nearby site after 2 or 3 years where they had aerially sprayed with fluoropropionate, so the African lovegrass did die off, but it stayed there. No regeneration occurred. It was a drought. However, they had a wildfire in 2001. Black summer bushfires came through, and Arbor got involved in doing restoration work down there. A whole lot of volunteers went as part of our First Aid for Burnt Bushland program, and Bush Heritage was sort of pleased with the results. This is a year later, a hell of a lot of work. It's deceptive. It looks like it was easy to get this native cover back, and 4 years later, the site is still not secure. There's still a lot of weed in the site. Visiting volunteers were involved in the project, but also the Bush Heritage then realised that this is real, and they started to put money into the program, and it's still going. We've got 86 native species on this 5-hectare site now, which is absolutely wonderful. So no planting whatsoever, and it was a site that the managers thought they would have to plant. You can see the condition of the site 1 year later. So red is the highest level of degradation. That's where very few natives appear. Then it goes through orange right up to bright green. Now, 4 years later, the site is looking spectacular and it's on its way to green. I just want to tell you about a buffer zone right next to it. I said to the manager, look, this is not a photo of the site. It's the closest thing I could find to what it looked like. It was covered with Hypocaris radicata cats here. Just looked and was a threat to our regenerating site. And I said, could you please spray it? You know, we would like you to just use a broadleaf selective herbicide, and then we'll get grasses up. And maybe over time you can direct seed it. You know, that would be good because it's a problem and it'd be a lot of work to treat. And he said, look, let's go down and have a look. The image at the top is what I expected it to look like. We would have to herbicide it, till it, and sow grass seed. He and I just went down and had a look, and we found 17 native species, including valuable forbs. And so, reluctantly I decided to spot spray, and we've actually got 29 native herbaceous species on the site now in very high frequencies across the site. It's not out of trouble, but far from that. But it's class 3 with patches of 2. It's no longer a serious threat. So the regeneration has been spectacular, really, and it certainly wasn't expected. This is a nearby, healthier site nearby. It's more successionally advanced. Would that site that I just showed you, would it be a candidate for combined reconstruction? Look, yes, it probably would. And, you know, I would have liked to have put some more species in there to make our job easier. But when you think of it, we actually had a higher species richness occur there than if we'd put a whole lot of seed in and got a quicker coverage by other natives competing. And also we were able to work with the soil seed bank so that we were able to flush out more of the weed and treat more of the weed and prevent that weed from reseeding and replenishing that weed seed bank. And our natives were replenishing the seed bank. So that's bringing up more native resilience for the next fire. We could have reduced the amount of weeding that we had to do. Mind you, it was probably only about 15 hours a year. But if we direct seeded it, would those grass seeds have taken, they would have had to have had a period of time before they developed anyway. You know, there are missing species, especially the woody species, but there's all the species that are present upslope in the really good regener area are present in this area. So actually we don't have to reintroduce species, and regen was worthwhile. So I'm suggesting, yes, it could be a candidate, but wait and see, prod and poke. There has to be a good reason for reintroducing. Yeah, look, it's a matter of costs and benefits and what you can do, how many people you've got, whether you've got the skilled people to do the work. But, you know, always, as I say, prod and poke and try for the regen approach first. The weed control is going to be needed anyway, whatever you do, whether you plant or direct seed. But one final comment I'd like to make is that this will differ with the ecosystem type, whether it's rainforest, sclerophyll, grassland or wetland. they all have different resilience models. And one thing about grassy ecosystems and wetland as well is that because they have shorter life cycles for a lot of, or shorter periods to maturity of a lot of the understory species, there's a very high potential for proliferation, which is not the case in tree-dominated landscapes like sclerophyll and rainforest. So rainforest is very highly migratory but hasn't got a huge amount of in situ resilience. Sclerophyll has very low migratory potential and pretty high in situ resilience because of soil seed banks, but grassland and wetlands have good in situ and migratory resilience, and they have this capacity for proliferation. You know, not a lot of the perennials persist in the ground for a long time in the understory and grasslands, but you might get the odd individual, and migratory potential is good. But the what I think has been operating in the site that I've been showing you just then is this amazing high potential for proliferation, and keeping the conditions open for that to happen without covering it all with trees is really, really important. So thank you very much for listening.
Massive thanks to our forum sponsors: City of Yarra, DNA Training, Arbour Green, Merry Creek Management Committee, Ecological Consultants Association Victoria, Stantec Australia, Global Green Environmental, NRM Jobs, and Nature Links. Arbour promotes the study and practice of ecological restoration and fosters and encourages effective management of Australia's natural areas by qualified people based on sound ecological principles. Join us to help promote good work practices, to strengthen our industry and network with like-minded people. Thanks for visiting Regen TV. Call by again soon for more restoration content you can trust.